This is the Edge of Excellence, empowering people to shape the future. Let's inspire, innovate, and explore together. Hello, and welcome back to Edge of Excellence, the podcast where we explore how leadership, culture, and technology can empower businesses to grow and thrive. I am your co-host, Jess DeForge, and today we're taking a look at what's ahead for IT in 2026. If you're a business leader who's trying to make smart decisions about technology, but you don't have the time to keep up with every new tool or trend, this episode is for you. We're cutting through the noise and focusing on what actually matters, how IT can drive real results for your business now and into the future.
Hi, I'm Brian. I'm the other co-host here. And back on our podcast today is Brian St. Marie. He's a principal consultant and VCIO at Iuvo. Brian brings over 2 decades of IT and leadership experience to the table, along with deep expertise in infrastructure, security, AI, compliance, and team building. He holds a master's in IT from Harvard, a molecular biology degree from UCSD, and certifications that span both project management and cloud architecture. In this conversation, Brian will share key trends shaping the future of IT, the shifts every business leader should be aware of, and how to make technology decisions that drive measurable business outcomes. Brian, welcome back to the Edge of Excellence.
Thanks for having me back.
So, Ryan, I want to kick things off by asking you what you think it means for IT to be a driver of growth and innovation going into 2026.
Yeah, I think I don't think that this is necessarily a novel concept, but I think people are increasingly becoming aware that IT is a driver of innovation, right? I mean, it initially started as kind of I think it began that way, kind of during the dot-com boom, and then fell into this support role, right? Because organizations built out technology very quickly, and then they need to build out new organizations within their teams to actually support all those new technologies that they integrated. And a lot of folks and a lot of organizations are still in that mindset of, we need this technology to do our day-to-day business, and we need these teams to be maintaining these systems. But we're going through another period of rapid technology acceleration, I think very similar to the dot-com boom. And people need to kind of reorient themselves to be looking at technology as a driver of innovation and business growth, and not just a cost center for maintaining the day-to-day.
Well, Brian, I think part of this too is this journey you just described from the dot-com to now. A lot of businesses that weren't using IT are now using. I mean, now every single business has some element of IT that's going to add an impact. I went to the dentist yesterday, and they did a 3D scan on my teeth, like they did a scanner, and they made a full model with computers, and I was able to see what my all this. And so back when even the dot-com, they were still doing x-rays with film, right? So even the businesses that you don't think would be technology driven or have IT as one of the things that helps them excel are now. It's hard to find a business that doesn't or IT can't impact.
Yeah, our HVAC company that we use for our boiler maintenance, I call them every year. I call them to set up our annual maintenance appointment, and they're like kind of Stone Age in that they have email, but they like send you a paper contract. Everything's by paper. You're supposed to mail back the contract. Usually they let me just call and kind of do everything over the phone. And then this year when I called, I didn't even realize this for the first minute I was on the phone, but I was talking to AI. Like it was an AI customer service agent that was taking all my information and set up my appointments. And so they kind of leapfrogged over the sort of typical trajectory you would take on technology. But yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. Just a normal HVAC, plumbing, electrical company, going right to the forefront of technology and figuring out how they can use it to simplify their business. And they had somebody call me back to confirm everything, an actual person, and I asked them how it's going with that rollout, and he said it's been great. They see all the transcripts, and generally it's going really well, and it's cut down on a lot of their like admin work and phone tag and stuff like that. So I think it can help pretty much any business.
That's so cool, and such a huge jump too. So good, kudos to them. What would you say, Brian, are some of the mind shifts that businesses are going to need to make, as we move into 2026 and we're thinking about IT in maybe a different way?
Yeah, I think, aside from what we already talked about, which is, breaking yourself out of that mindset of IT as an expense, just a line item, kind of like electricity or heat or whatever. We've been through some truly unprecedented changes over the last, 10 years. And I think businesses are feeling a little bit like ping pong balls. We went fully remote, and everyone was like, remote's the future of work. And now a lot of companies are pulling back on that, but not all. Like Iuvo, we're fully remote. And so I think it's very hard to know as a business leader, like where should you be focusing your energy? I think that the biggest mindset shift is to decide what's right for your organization. Don't just kind of follow along with what you see other businesses doing, because other businesses also don't know what the heck to do and they're trying all different kinds of things. So you really need to know your team, your industry, and your unique business, and understand what fits for it and do what's right for your organization. And I think that now is a time where unique thinking and out of the box approaches to things can really make a big difference for businesses. Not just with the integration of AI and things like that, but the transition to remote work is another example of where you can completely reinvent your business and make yourself much more effective by following your own playbook, not necessarily copying what everybody else is doing.
I think also that this area about mindset makes me think about culture, about a business culture, about how if they want to be resilient, and IT can help with that. And you saw that especially with during COVID, people were forced to think differently about how they can get their work done, and IT came to the rescue with remote, with more laptops and so forth. And so I think and when leaders are thinking about IT can be part of a leader's thought process around the culture of how do we enable people to do their best work. And I think IT has a big place in there.
Yeah, I think that's been a shift that's been going on for a while, which is integrating IT more into the leadership conversation. It's sort of the creation of the CTO role, the CIO role, and just bringing technology to the table of the executive decision making is something that's been going on for a long time, 30 years or more. And I think that trend will still continue to happen. It's in smaller businesses, you typically don't see a dedicated IT leader still. You're often outsourcing to a consultant or a managed service provider. And I think that that's fine, from a cost perspective. Like, you can't have, a full board when you're a 30-person organization. But at the same time, you want to make sure that you're integrating IT into the conversation. I think organizations that have VCIOs, that play sort of that fractional CIO role are very important, because you can bring them into the executive conversations. You're not just sort of tacking this onto the CFO or the person in charge of operations. Like, they're also secondarily responsible for managing the IT consultants, and then you have this sort of gap between executive conversations and what's actually happening with technology, because everything's getting filtered through this person that technology is not their strength. So yeah, I think even for smaller businesses, working more tightly with your consultant or partners of choice can make a really big difference.
Yeah, I actually just had a great conversation with one of our clients last week, and she spoke to that exactly, just saying how she's an expert in what she does. And so she likes having these supplemental experts that kind of fill in those gaps, because how could anyone be, an expert in all things? And in order to truly like move the needle for your business, it is a smart move to make sure you have all the experts at the table making those, important decisions. So I'm hearing a lot of future ready, right? It's like a buzzword. It's something everybody's talking about. So in your opinion, Brian, is future ready really all about AI, or are there other aspects of IT that you think are important and included in this future ready conversation that people are having?
So no, it's not all about AI. I I guess it's all about AI in the sense that, 20 years ago it was all about the internet. It wasn't to say that everything was internet, but like, internet became such a foundational driver of so many things that it was integrated into everything you were talking about doing for the most part. And I think AI is similarly going to be that way. It won't be necessarily, in your face all the time. It's just going to kind of be a part of the tools you use, that would just become increasingly integrated into the tools you use. So I think there's kind of two sides to that. One is having a very AI focused mentality, like, what unique approaches can we bring to the table for our business with AI, versus like just the tools we already use, improving by integrating AI into their standard scaffolding and just the way they already function. So even if you're like, I don't want to deal with the AI at all, it's still going to kind of come through those products you use. But yeah, there's plenty of other things I think that businesses need to focus on. I think that distributed workforces are becoming more important, even if you want to be, back in the office. Like, pretty much every organization now is allowing hybrid work. So you do continue to have that security concern around making sure that you're able to have your employees work remotely without compromising customer data or proprietary data. So things like SASE and distributed networking. Compliance is going to continue to be really important. I think the law always lags tech, right? Tech moves so fast. That law is still catching up to the tech of 10 years ago in the sense of, compliance still needs to adapt to what people are actually using technology for. And that'll come down hard at some point, in the next 10 years around AI stuff. So I think compliance is something to be thinking about too, and making sure you're doing things right from the get go. Don't kind of just slap things together and hope for the best. Like you're going to end up paying for that later if you expect your business to grow and, sustain over the next 5, 10 years.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought up security because that's where my mind was going as well with this future ready is even if you are not looking to implement AI, the hackers or the cyber criminals of the world are finding ways to use all of this really cool new technology. And you have to be prepared defensively, even if you don't want to be incorporating AI into your business. Technology is moving so fast and it's not just for the better good. And so this need to be prepared, especially for, industries that have proprietary data or customer data that they need to protect. I think it's really important to be at a minimum thinking about making sure that you're protecting those types of things for your business as well.
Right. Yeah. I mean, a lot of it comes down to picking the right partners, right? Because
Mhm.
like I said, even if you don't care about AI, but you need, security software, you need some kind of, I mean, it used to be antivirus, now it's endpoint detection response, like EDR software. Those types of products are integrating AI, and they're going to do it to a different level. Certain product you might see your typical, just picking names like maybe SentinelOne has always been sort of at the top of the heap, but they're going to fall behind because CrowdStrike is going to do a better job of implementing AI. So you kind of need to pay attention to it for at least from that perspective to make sure that the products and the partners you're working with are staying at the forefront. And you can focus on your own business. That's putting aside like, oh, we need our own AI chatbot or our own, workflow optimizations through AI, which is also still valuable. But if you don't even want to deal with that, you at least
Right.
need to make sure that the products and partners you're working with are paying attention to it.
Well, I think this is also you talk about your HVAC person leapfrogging, and people are able to leapfrog. And I think one of the great things that's happening right now are things that Microsoft's doing, for example, because I mean, 10 years ago or whatever it was, you had to buy a lot of enterprise grade products that were very expensive to get the features that are now built right into Microsoft from protecting your document security, a whole secure ecosystem. You can implement compliance with those products. So Microsoft's just an example. I'm sure there are other examples, but if you're a business today, you can have so much more capabilities that you didn't have until you reach a certain scale.
Yeah, it's very true. Yeah. And we talked about this in the last podcast, but AI is a great democratizer in the sense that it really helps level the playing field for ability with different things. So yeah, you can rapidly accelerate, as a small business especially, you can rapidly accelerate your innovation and development by integrating AI into your workflow, simply because it makes all your employees much more capable and able to work much more quickly. So it allows you to kind of close that gap where, you want to, small business is all about squeezing out the most productivity, right? Because it's all about, the profit margin and trying to get enough money to pay your costs and then hopefully grow. And growth often means having to hire more people, which can be expensive. So if you can just delay that a little, so you squeeze a little bit more productivity out of your team, so it allows you to expand a little bit more healthily, then that's for the best. And so I think AI really helps to even that playing field where you can do that with a small team. You can be much more efficient.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, Brian, you mentioned that a lot of businesses are likely feeling like ping pong balls. Things are just advancing so fast when it comes to IT, and this wanting to keep up and make sure that you're not falling behind, I think can be overwhelming, especially for smaller businesses that maybe don't have these internal IT teams and experts to help kind of guide them and do the research. Do you have any advice or tips for some of the smaller businesses that maybe don't have those internal teams of where to start? I know you said focus on your business needs, but what does that even mean when it comes to IT and kind of prepping for what's ahead?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I think if you're a very small business, well, so I don't think it's possible to start any business without, tackling technology
Mhm.
pretty much immediately. You got to set up an email address, you need a website. A lot of people just like get a Gmail address and, they don't even have a website, and that's how they start. And like, that's okay, I guess. But yeah, as you grow, you need to start taking it more seriously. I think it gets back to that partnership issue. You really do need to, you're very good at kind of directing these things around into pitches for Ayuvo, but like I think picking good partners is extremely important, right? Like you're trying to get a business off the ground or focus on growth, rapid growth, and IT is not your business model. It's part of your business model, but yeah, it comes down to leveraging really good partners to make sure that you're growing in a way that's scalable and sustainable. Um, because we see all the time, coming into startups that reach the anywhere from 20 to 70 person range, and they're just hitting a ceiling based on like what their you know scientists or dev team or whatever slapped together in the early days because they didn't want to invest in IT, and like now it's restricting their ability to grow right when you're hitting that takeoff point. So it's like that's kind of the worst case scenario. Like you don't want to be in that situation when you're trying to go for another round of funding, and like you can't grow because you've got 16 different systems and nobody knows where your data is. And so I think that even if you don't want to invest in a partner right away, I think doing it sooner than you would otherwise think is probably wise. If you
Yeah.
think we're going to need to do this in 2 years, then that probably means you should do it now. Just get a little bit ahead of it, and that'll work out much better.
Well, and also I think when it comes to a partner that you choose, you should really think about there's many people out here who want you to buy a very specific solution. You need to have a company that's going to scale with your needs. I coming from being in this industry, there are a lot of companies out there that say, well, you have to do this our way, and it's good for us. And you have to make sure that whoever is helping you is saying what's good for you as a company. And so you could start out like, hey, I want to start off small and simple, and we don't need to over engineer it until we get to a certain scale. And then you get somebody who's going to listen to you as a kind of advisor versus somebody who's going to come in and say, here's our cookie cutter approach. It works really great because we can, so forth. So I think it's important also to ask some questions about, just make sure that you're standing up for yourself as a business and saying, I want to do what's right for me.
Yeah, I think that Microsoft and Google have both made very strong plays to build, what they call productivity suites that give small businesses, a large amount of what they need to get going. But the two things that happen as you grow after you sign up for something like Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace is that you rapidly find that you need more complex implementations of those platforms, and then you might need to branch out beyond those platforms. So when you hit that stretch, you really do need to work with a company that knows what they're doing, because those environments can get very complicated very quickly.
So I completely agree. And I'm just putting myself in the shoes of a small business owner that may be listening or watching this. And do you have pointers, either one of you, about how to find the right partner? Because I think when you look online, there's a lot of, IT consulting partners that say a lot of the same things. And so if you are ready to make that next step and partner with someone that can help you kind of sort through the noise of everything and feel better prepared going into 2026, what questions should you be asking? How do you advocate for yourself with a partner? And how do you identify a quality partner versus someone who's just really good at marketing?
Don't be afraid to challenge their assumptions, because like Brian mentions, a lot of them are going to come with these kind of cookie cutter solutions. We're not in the era of cookie cutter solutions. We're in the era of innovation. So challenging that and asking questions about like why this versus that, even if you generally agree, always playing devil's advocate to push them. Use AI to your advantage, educate yourself ahead of time, even have it up while you're talking to them, and ask it questions, and like bring it into the conversation to give yourself more clout, more expertise in the conversation, so you can challenge potential partners more. I think I crazily, I think that I read a study that it came out like almost a year ago that said something like 80 or 90% of businesses are searching for, like, business to business relationships are coming about via AI now. People are going to AI to ask questions about how to find partners that they're looking for, which is crazy to me, 80 to 90%. It makes sense, I guess, when you think about it, but that's just such a huge jump in such a short period of time. So, you can certainly do that. Just make sure you understand the pros and cons of how AI works. Like, it's going to sometimes lie to you, but if you have a conversation with it back and forth and ask it leading, probing questions, you can generally get to the truth and get to useful information. Um, Yeah, I think in general, if you know, try to educate yourself as much as you can going in. Um, and that could be using AI or just more traditional, like Googling around or looking at websites, look at testimonials, see how long a business has been around, right? Things like that, I think can kind of go far. It's not that different from picking any, contractor or partner personally or professionally.
Yeah, I was going to add to that that I think if you're searching, if you're doing a general search, you'll find five different companies that all say the same thing. We're the best people, whatever, and so forth. So you can find your filters. If you're in a certain vertical, make sure see if they have that experience in that vertical. And I think also AI, like Brian said, AI is very useful in that. And of course, I think you there's always referrals. People that you ask people like who have you heard that does a good job? Who have reputation? Uh, so I think it's a trust. It's I think the best business relationships come out of kind of who you refer to. Because I certainly think they would if your friends would you ask your friends and they had a bad experience, they would guide you away from something too.
Now, I'm curious what both of your thoughts are on this because I think about Ayuvo and how we operate and how we really allow all voices to be part of big conversations for the company. And I think it's really powerful that we do that. And when I think about other businesses planning for 2026 and thinking about what direction they want to take IT and what works best for their business, in my mind, it seems to make sense to kind of survey your employees and see where they feel they have pain points or gaps when it comes to IT to kind of think of the whole picture. I'm curious what you both think about that approach, or if you think that creates too much noise and can kind of make those conversations more difficult.
On the surface, that seems like something valuable, and it can be. I think if you frame it properly, I think there's there's a concern around too many cooks in the kitchen in the sense that if you
Yeah.
poll everybody, you're you're opening the door to constant feedback, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But I think what you
Yeah.
don't want to do is say, hey, we want to hear your opinions, let everybody share their opinions, and then not take action on those opinions, because then that's
Yeah.
just going to agitate everybody, right? And even if you do take action on some of the opinions, you still have this issue where you're potentially ignoring other people. So it's not just about like surveying your employees. It's an entire cultural thing where you're making sure that not only are voices being heard but acknowledged, and that I think is where it's much harder. And so businesses, it's easy enough to be like, let's send out a survey monkey. Great, we're such a good company. But that's the easiest part, right? Like actually following up on that and making people feel included is challenging, and it comes down to your business culture. So I would sort of start that in the reverse, and that not say like let's send out a survey, but actually say like how can we foster a culture where people feel heard. And then once you figured out processes that work around that, start sending out surveys. um, but that being said, I think, yeah, it's really important, especially now because people, again, we're in the era of innovation, not cookie cutter solutions. So all kinds of folks are finding unique ways to short circuit their workflows and leapfrog things, and optimize their processes throughout the day. And you want to know about those things because you can potentially leverage them to grow the business, not just make one person more productive. But at the same time, you also have to understand not everybody's technical, right? So when you ask them what are your IT pain points, you might get somewhat unclear answers, and so it takes a lot of follow up. So the short answer is I think it's a great idea as long as you're prepared for the work that it will create for leadership after the fact.
Yeah, I want to jump on that a little bit too. Is what you talked about. I'm surprised. I'm really about the culture, right? And I think you think even allowing people to technology can allow people to be empowered to do their work because they have all the information access at their fingertips. But if I think an IT survey can help. I think, but I also would say maybe as simple as what are the barriers for you to get your job done? What are the things that are like if you had unrestricted access or unrestricted nothing was in your way, what is in your way to doing your next thing? And so it's a more serious, a little more complex question sometimes. And they say, well, if I have to copy this data 3 times and do this thing, and you're like, oh, so that becomes an IT problem. But that's really what they're really doing is they're trying to figure out all the things that just take too much time or just really are getting in the way of their doing business. And I think as a business owner, it depends on the size, you may need some guidance in that. You may need somebody to help you translate what this becoming a too difficult, too time consuming, or you know, to help to translate to what that could be in an IT solution. Because it's really hard to, if you don't know what the solution is, it might be right in front of you. You just don't know it because you don't have that expertise.
Yep.
So I think that some of that is really just digging into enabling people, and then having somebody to call, to bounce ideas off, to say, how can we make this better? Often we found, of course, is that IT can be that part of that solution.
Yeah, I have firsthand experience with that at Iuvo. I'm very spoiled here because I have all the experts right at my disposal. And I remember having a meeting where it was essentially like, all right, Jess, it's your turn. We're doing so much innovation internally. How can we help? What would make your life easier? And I didn't even know how to answer the question because I couldn't imagine there would be some sort of IT fix that someone could design because I'm not a technical person. So exactly to your point, I struggled with that. And so they essentially our experts coached me through how to answer by saying, take IT off the table. You don't have to think about what the solution would be. Just tell us your problems, or what would be in a perfect world if we could wave a magic wand, what would be great for you. And just by that dialogue, they were able to say, oh, okay, cool. We can use AI to make this automation. And it just was mind blowing. It is so cool to get to work with the level of experts that we have. For me, I'm just constantly blown away by their ability to do something like that and coach someone that's at my level of technology to like get that out of me and find solutions. And then Brian St. Marie, to your point, it was very much just this open communication of, okay, Jess, we hear this. We're thinking we could, create these solutions. It's in the pipeline. We're going to be working on it, in such and such quarter. We're going to add that to next quarter's rock or something along the lines where it doesn't feel like it just ended up in some sort of vacuum or some, time suck of we met, we talked about it and it didn't go anywhere. It makes me feel heard and supported and makes me feel like at some point it would be addressed. But it's interesting that you brought that up. This idea that non-technical people may find it difficult to answer that question,
Yeah.
because I certainly understand that from my perspective.
Yeah.
So that's a good point to make. So we talked a little bit about risk in the sense of AI and attackers using some of this high technology, and we've touched on this topic a little bit in past episodes. And it goes along with a little bit of what we just talked about with kind of talking to your employees and asking them what they're using for innovation tools and how they're kind of implementing things into their workflows. Because realistically, the idea of whether or not you've adopted AI, your employees likely have, I think is super important, not only from a learning perspective and continuing to grow and innovate within your business, but also from a security perspective to get kind of a grip on who is using what and how. And that way you can assess those tools and those methods and kind of try to build some guardrails around that. Do either one of you have advice on how to approach that where it feels safe to share that information, no one feels punished, you're encouraging innovation, but at the same time protecting your business?
Yeah, I think that so there's a term called shadow IT. It's been around a while, and it's this idea of, if you don't provide the tools people need to do their jobs, they're likely to find those tools on their own. And that might even be encouraged in the early days of startups, because again, you have highly technical people in their field, scientists or developers, and they're going to have their tools of preference and they're going to bring them to the table. And you might have, 6 scientists using 12 different tools to do their jobs. So I don't think that this is necessarily a new challenge, and businesses are already probably somewhat familiar with this idea of like, okay, how do we control that? And AI is another example of that. So integrate it that way. If you've already got policies in place, add AI into that policy. If you don't have policies in place like that, why not? I mean, talk about where the life cycle of your business is, and whether you're at that point where you're concerned about this sort of IT sprawl and lack of control, which is again very common. Like when we start working with organizations that are on the smaller stage, like maybe 20 people or something, and they start hitting this point where the leadership has no idea what people are doing and there's no really defined workflows, but they recognize that has to get fixed because they're going into a rapid scaling phase. So it's very similar to that. I wouldn't try to, I think that there's a lot of conversation about like AI readiness and all this kind of stuff. And to some extent that's important, but it's not drastically different than what businesses are already doing, making sure that their data is where they think it is, that it's not going into the wrong hands or leading the organization without being aware that they understand what tools their teams are using. It just falls kind of into that. So if you're not already thinking about that, definitely think about that. And AI is just a part of that.
I know that we talked about this in previous episodes about having an AI policy and so forth and what people can do. I think that also starts with a bigger conversation of what people are trying to do with AI, and what seems to be a root of many of these pre- being prepared and being avoiding risk is understanding your data and how your data is, where your data is stored. And I personally have encountered some really cool things that around I guess it's AIP in Microsoft or DLP, where basically you can make sure your data, no matter where it is, whether it's in on your computer, in the cloud, or in someone else's email, that you can control it through policies. And the example I like to give on this is always that I would we would set up a security element on a let's say a spreadsheet, and you send it to somebody and say you can open the spreadsheet, and then they come back to you. So, but my friend, I gave it to my accountant Fred, and he can't open it. I'm like, yeah, because I didn't allow Fred. And so before this, some of these considerations were there. You didn't even know where your data went. Once you ship that spreadsheet off or that PowerPoint, it could be everywhere. And so I think understanding what for whether it's um, employee sensitive data or whatever it may be, just understanding how you protect that in the beginning. So if it applies to people, it applies to AI, if whatever the tools you're using that are really making a difference, AI is going to do something that a human can do way, way faster. So you want to make sure that you've thought about what your data is, how it's protected, how it's labeled, and so forth.
So, are you seeing any areas where you think businesses are over investing or maybe underprepared?
Yeah, I think that that's a good question. Over investing, my personal opinion, over investing in return to office is an error. But every business has to make their own decisions, like I said earlier. I think getting back to what I was just saying about AI readiness, I think over investing in AI readiness, which is maybe not necessarily a huge investment, but nonetheless, you don't want to get lost in preparing for a technology and then never actually rolling that technology out because you can't complete the first step. Um, we often find that rolling out AI into an organization, the preparation is part of the rollout, and you can even use AI to help you with that prep. So I think, thinking too hard about that or investing in time and effort from your team or consultants or whatever to help with data cleanup and organization and stuff is probably not best spent. Underinvesting has always been in security and compliance, and I think that will continue to be the case. AI is going to accelerate threats globally through IT to a level people can't even really comprehend today. So I think that having security and compliance forefront is extremely important, and I think a lot of companies will get caught off guard by that just because um, the pacing of it is going to catch people by surprise.
So, in thinking of prepping for 2026, if there are people listening or watching and they've decided that they would like to bring in some sort of consultant to partner with, is there an ability to do like an initial project? Is there something that you think would be like best case scenario as a starting point when they engage with this consultant or partner, where they could say, this is where we want to start, this is the project we want to do? Or in most cases, is it this like long-term relationship that they're signing up for? Like, do you have advice on how to kind of initiate that relationship and how to best make that best work for them into 2026?
Yeah, I think it depends on your business strategy. We see both situations very often. Like another over-investing area would be like purchasing tools because you were wowed at a demo, but not really having any strategy to actually implement those tools. In which case, your ROI is not going to be there because you need a strategy to implement these tools. You can't just throw something at the wall and assume it's going to change your business overnight. So if you're in that mode where you're looking for tools to optimize your environment, that's a good opportunity to work with the consultants, and maybe it can be a one-off engagement where you say, look, we want to implement a new CRM or whatever it is, and work with them to vet and implement a CRM and actually train your staff and make sure you're seeing the ROI on that. Alternatively, it could just be that you're struggling with the day to day and this sprawl of IT products and the shadow IT situation, and you want a partner to come in, clean all that up, and maintain it for you, and manage your environment. Set some standards, make sure you're on the right roadmap for success and scalability in the future. In which case, it's more of an ongoing relationship. So it could kind of be either side depending on where you are at in your business. Um, and obviously they can spread from one from the other. Once you work with somebody that you like working with, if as long as they have the skill set that spreads between those projects versus day-to-day management, then yeah, you're pretty much well set up once you've got one company you like working with.
Yeah, I'll add on to that, and it goes back to a question you asked earlier, Jess, about like how do you find good providers in a sea of everyone. And I think a really great way to do that is to initiate a project that's really important to you. Like say, I want, like it could be like I want a roadmap of where am I now, where are my risks, my vulnerabilities, and how do I get to where I want to go, and that's unique to my business. Or it could be like Brian said, it's something that we bought this thing, we don't know how to make it work, or things are way more complicated than we thought they would be, and just get some, and you'll find the quality of the company of how well they do that project. If they don't do that project well, then you're not going to continue. If you say, well, I really like this work, what else can we do together, or can you help me on a regular basis because I'm the person that everybody walks up to and says my computer's not working. So I think a project often is a really great way to showcase or to find the right partner and to do that for you.
Yeah, no, I love that idea of starting with a project. So this may be more of a summary question, but what would you say are some of the practical steps that someone could walk away with from this episode starting today? They're interested. Any advice on next steps for them that they could start with this week?
Yeah, so like how to wrangle their IT essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say start talking to folks about, I think everybody understands like who the IT person is in their company, even if they're technically the office manager or the accountant or whatever. You can start talking to them about like what is it that you're doing, and like what's your, get a sense of what the flow is in your business for IT, and start mapping out, as a leader, identify where areas seem redundant or not necessary, and start thinking about what it would look like for IT to be a success in your organization. And then that'll start getting you thinking properly about how to find the right partner. And that's a very that's an answer for a very small business that hasn't really taken the plunge of technology yet. For more highly technological businesses that maybe are large or are just growing rapidly, other things to do would be to hold your staff accountable for having some kind of roadmap or vision for IT. And um, you yourself, if you're not normally the technology leader in the organization, make sure you understand that roadmap and you're behind it. And maybe you know work with a company that will help you get an outside view of that, and make sure that you're on the right track for your business. Because, like I've said already several times, like there's no cookie cutter solutions anymore. I don't think that you can just kind of do the same playbook for technology that you did 10 years ago and expect to do well. You need to be much more dynamic and customizable to your business, and understand what your business needs.
This we've been talking about 2026 being, what can we do to prepare for that. 2025 has been amazingly wild ride, right? As far as technology. And I think, Brian, you said it numerous times, but you want to be an innovative company. You want to innovate. You want to, whatever your business may be, you want to get your drug out to market. You want to get better customer service. You want to market better, whatever. I think it's a chance for you to, as a leader and as a group, if you're not a leader, if you're part of a team, is get together and say, what can we do to be innovate towards being a better company. To maybe it's I want to grow the company's revenue, but I don't want to have to necessarily have more staff, or whatever. Define what those parameters are. You start with that, like let the right now the world is your oyster. There's so many things you can do, and I think it's really about starting that planning process, and along with, I'll echo what Brian said about, finding ways to help people be accountable for those results, and building those up. So I think it's going to be, I think any business listening to this, if you're inspired at all, or anybody person listening to this, is now's the time to really to start thinking about ways to innovate, because there's so many great ways to do it. And think it's if 2025 is an indicator of that, 2026 is going to be wild.
Yes, I totally agree. So my last question, we have touched on it, but just to leave it really strong period at the end. If you're not ready to innovate, you're not ready to take those types of steps at a minimum, what are some things that businesses are overlooking going into 2026? So essentially, what is your warning? So if you do nothing but this, make sure you're paying attention to what, or make sure you are strengthening what.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Um, I guess I would advocate for knowledge, like be aware of what's going on in your organization. Because even the best tech fails if there's not buy-in and training in your organization. So, be invested in the technology in your organization as a leader. Recognize it's a source of innovation, not just something that drains your bank account every month, right? You don't want to be in that mode. You want to be looking at working with partners and have the culture in your business that technology is an accelerator. So if there's nothing else you're going to do, I would say look at how you're using technology today and recognize where it's failing you because all you're doing is spending money to keep the lights on. And start to try to re-envision how technology can actually accelerate your business. That's probably the number one most important thing. And then if you can do that, you'll start to see ways, even without increasing your budget, you'll start to see ways to more efficiently use the money you're already spending to get much better results.
I'll add to that around really design your culture. And if you design your culture correctly, it's not it does involve technology, but if you design your culture so that people are empowered to do really great things, that everybody at the level can contribute. And then where it goes into technology is we're finding like most millennials or most uh, I don't know, generation XYZ, whatever. They're, like they're using technology naturally, right? And some of the same approaches that don't necessarily work. So if you enable them and to do things, they might surprise you in saying, well, I have another way, innovative way that's I know our company's been doing this for so many years, but I'm doing this, and have a way to have that feedback come back into the business to say, we got to, we got to try to like capture this gold here that's happening right here over this department. Let's see how we can replicate that. And often I think the generation that grew up with technology in their fingertips are now just doing amazing things that can bring back into the business.
Yeah, it's very cool to see just what my nieces and nephews are doing, and they're under 5. In some ways, they're better with technology than I am. And I would just cap off with something that you said, Brian St. Marie, about IT being this, drain on your bank account. And I think if you align with that, if you listen to that and you said, yes, that's how I feel, my IT feels like just this drain on my bank account, and you don't have an IT partner, maybe 2026 is the year to try out a partner to see if you can turn that around. If you do have a partner and you're feeling like this drain on your bank account and you're not seeing ROI, then maybe 2026 is the year to try a new partner, because it shouldn't be that way. And that's what I've learned at Ayuvo is it shouldn't. IT should accelerate the growth of your business. It should be a value add and you should have ROI. So if that's not how you feel in Q4 2025, take a hard look at that and think of ways to flip that around, because those that don't are the ones that are going to be left behind. Because exactly like you said, Brian, things are moving fast. Innovation is such an exciting time and businesses can really grow with this. And if they don't jump on the bandwagon for that and get the right support in place, I think it'll be easy for them to be left behind.
Yep. And I would say even if I know this is an IUGO podcast, but even if you like your partner, challenge them with this, right? If you're getting that sort of like keep the lights on type of support, but you like the company you're working with, challenge them and say like, how can we innovate? How can we do better? Because that'll at least tell you, are they able to help you with that or are they not, right? And so I think that that's still an important thing. You don't necessarily have to just go out and start looking for a new partner. Although of course we would love that, but yeah, I think it's just about leading from the front in the sense that you're defining the culture for your business and you're making it clear to everybody, both the partners you work with and your staff, that technology is seen as a driver of innovation, not as just like something we have to deal with.
Yeah, a question I often ask people I talk to is, "How do you love your IT?" And they say, "Yeah, I love my IT. They do so much great stuff." You know, like hang on to them because they're good, right? And but there are it's the 80-20 rule. Like probably that's 20%, and 80% of them are like struggling, and they're not their partner isn't keeping up with them, or not really uh, able to solve their problems or move their business forward. So I say, if anybody listens, you love your IT, go, buy them a cup of coffee and say thank you so much. And if you don't, then check it out. Right, just look at your options. We obviously are biased. We have really great services, but at the same time, hang on to the ones that you love. Yeah.
All right, that wraps up this episode of Edge of Excellence. We've covered a lot, from shifting IT mindsets to cutting through the noise of trends to the practical steps that leaders can take now to prepare to 2026.
Big takeaway: it's no longer just a support function. It's a strategic driver of growth, resilience, and innovation. The choices leaders make today will define their competitive edge tomorrow.
If you'd like to learn more about how Ayuvo helps organizations align technology with business outcomes, you can visit ayuvotech.com. You'll also find this episode, along with every past and future conversation from Edge of Excellence, right there.
Thanks for joining us, and until next time, keep thinking ahead, keep investing wisely, and keep leading at the edge of excellence.
Thank you for tuning in to the Edge of Excellence. We hope today's insights empower you to shape your future and rise to your full potential. Let's continue to grow, innovate, and lead, pushing the boundaries of excellence.